Let's dive into your Friday edition of the Tall Can Audio Podcast. Matt Robinson along with you here as we get ready for another weekend. Hope you've all had a fantastic week thus far and enjoyed the things that we've been able to drop for you along the way. We had our usual Monday edition, lots of hockey in there, some baseball, all kinds of things. Graham Creech was here on Tuesday from TSN 1200. Talked to him about all kinds of things around the NFL, the CFL, of course, looking ahead to hockey as well. We're all just kind of getting geared up for that, so it's on everybody's mind right now. And on Wednesday afternoon, we dropped what I thought was a pretty fun chat with Dan Schulman, the play-by-play voice of your Toronto Blue Jays. And many of you have heard me say throughout the week we were going to do something here on Friday that has fallen apart at the last second. So if you were here for that, I apologize to you. And I sort of toyed with the idea of just letting it ride and putting something out on social media. I also thought, I've already had the conversation with Julian McKenzie that we've been teasing that was, scheduled to drop next week. Maybe I put it out today, but that would sort of break up the schedule in more ways than was necessary. So just me and you here today. And like I said, if you were looking forward to that other thing, apologies, but that one was out of my control. So here we sit. I want to wrap up what we just saw from the Toronto Blue Jays after 4 games down in Tampa Bay. There are a couple little hockey things kicking around on my mind as camps are now underway, both the media day and the fitness testing, and now most teams have been on the ice for at least one day. You've got all your local beat reporters breathlessly tweeting out lines while there's like 55 guys in every camp and none of it means almost anything. We'll get into some of that. We'll see how long we want to kick around here. I will remind you that on Monday morning, Michaela Schreider will be in for Rob, and we're looking forward to talking to her. A little bit of odd scheduling there. I'm not sure what to do about it, and maybe it will be no more complicated than just waiting to see how it plays out. When Schreids is co-hosting, she typically prefers to run early afternoon Sunday. Rob and I record mid-afternoon Sunday. If that sounds like splitting hairs, it really is. But Sunday is a bit of a full day. The Blue Jays are playing in Kansas City, and that game starts a little bit later than normal, obviously being in the Central Time Zone. And the Leafs and Sens are facing off at, I believe, 3 o'clock at Canadian Tire Center. Now, this is the first preseason game of the year. I can't imagine the Leafs are going to send anything more to Ottawa than what they are absolutely legally mandated to do by the CBA. There's always a certain number of this many guys with, this many games in the league or this many games played last year. It's going to be as bare bones, I would imagine, as they can get away with. So I'm not sure whether or not missing out on those 2 Sunday things is going to matter. If Schreids and I happen to be finished recording before the Jays and before that Leafs and Sens game, and then something fairly newsworthy happens in both, whether it's a big injury in the hockey game and let's say the Jays clinch a playoff spot on the Sunday in Kansas City. Both of those things are possible. One of them far less desirable than the other. But then the Monday show would feel incomplete. So maybe the thing to do is do the show that we were planning to do with Schreids anyway. And then as the evening rolls in, I come back here and add on to it or record a second show for Monday. We'll see. But the reason I bring it up is just so that if you're surprised on the Monday morning that neither of those things has been discussed, you'll know why that was. It's just the timing of when we typically record with Michaela on the Sunday. So we'll see how it shakes loose. If there's a reason to tack onto it later on, we will. If there isn't, we won't. The Jays split 4 games down in Tampa, and we've often called Tropicana Field. I'm also going to do this thing. No need to get into it, as most of you who catch a lot of these shows know. When it's just me and there's no beers to be discussed, I turn to an old favorite that there's always a few of in my fridge. The Octopus Wants to Fight from the Great Lakes Brewery, a go-to. So that's what we're rolling with here. Once more, it's been talked about 100 times before on the show, so we won't get into it here today. Look, 2 out of 4 games in Tampa, like I said, what is typically the House of Horrors at Tropicana Field. We weren't at Tropicana Field. You're playing still in the Yankees minor league ballpark that the Rays have been using all year after Tropicana basically blew over during that hurricane last fall. And I guess that's become our new House of Horrors. In the first couple of games, it was just, they don't have the right number of cameras in the ballpark, so your reviews on fan interference and potential home runs are botched, and it's costing you. And I know at the end of the day, later on, Nathan Lucas comes up after he was the outfielder who was robbed by the fan, and it was called a home run for Tampa. He comes up later on and hits a controversial home run of his own, and you're like, well, I guess everything's even, but everything is not even. That Tampa Bay home run was a 3-run shot. And now all of a sudden that game is tight and you have to use your best bullpen arms. You're bringing in Hoffman again, who's clearly out of gas. It really cost them that game ended up becoming as tight as it was. These are things that have to be done right. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching 2 baseball teams this year, 2 major league teams play in minor league parks. And I want to give Tampa a little bit of sympathy as much as they irritate the piss out of me. A hurricane blows over your ballpark is probably not really your fault. The fact that your ballpark is a giant tent that has been a piece of shit since the day you moved into it kinda is your fault, but I'm letting you off the hook because this was a Mother Nature thing. You got Oakland sitting out there playing in a minor league ballpark in Sacramento by choice. Destroyed their own market, not ready to move to a new market, so now you're sitting in Sacramento. It's gross that there are 2 major league teams playing in minor league ballparks this year, and that it prevents you from having the proper cameras, the proper technology installed in these places. And quite frankly, I blame MLB a little bit. If you're going to allow these teams to embarrass you all year and play in a minor league ballpark, you still have to pay to upgrade those cameras and go, well, they're only there for 1 year or whatever. Who knows how long Oakland's going to hang out in Sacramento? There is still not a shovel in the ground in Vegas to build their new ballpark where they're trying to move. Tampa, it sounds like they're rebuilding. They've been trying for so long to get a new ballpark, and now they're investing money in rebuilding the giant rec room under a tent that they play. Again, that's not their fault, but it is a little silly. MLB has to insist that all the modern amenities that are required to run a proper MLB game are installed. And I'm not talking about boxes and suites when I say amenities. I'm talking about the right number of cameras in the right positions. I don't care if you're only there for 1 year. Put in the fucking camera. Well, the foul pole's not as tall here as it is. Well, it has to be. If you're letting them play there this year, extend that shit. If you're going to let a Major League Baseball team play in this park, it has to be a Major League park for the year. So you finish this series 2-2. The cameras are really not the whole story of the series as much as I'm droning on about it. But in a total of 3 out of those 4 games, I believe it was Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, you had 3 total runs over those 3 games. Not good enough, man. Not close to good enough. And the Jays are trying to close this out. And we're all having a great time on Monday and Tuesday. Couple of comeback wins. We got the Trey Yesavage beautiful debut, all of it. But it requires you to pull more games out of the fire. And I'm on side with the story that we keep telling that, you know, this team is never out of it and they never give up on a game or on an at-bat. They're always right there hanging tough. And it's true. But how about you stop falling behind all the damn time? These guys recently are not hitting people in the rotation. They're waiting until you get into a bullpen. And that's so dangerous as you race towards the playoffs when every bullpen has flamethrowers that are coming out. Like, if you've watched any amount of playoff baseball, you know these days starters go 5 or 6, and then it's just monster after monster coming out of the pen. So you're not going to get to eat Tampa's bullpen alive. Or Baltimore's bullpen, what's left of it. Like, when you don't get to those guys' starters, they probably have weak bullpens because they're not good teams. That's not going to be the case in the playoffs. And you need to see something right now that shows you these guys are going to get to starters and knock them out early, especially in a playoff series. You want to knock somebody out of the game in game 1 or game 2 in like 3 innings and get into that bullpen early. I know that sounds counterintuitive to what I'm saying, but if you're going to play the same team for 5 or 7 games straight, chew up that bullpen early so there's nothing left in the tank when you get to game 5, game 7, whatever it might be. So that's a little worrying, but I will say taking 2 out of 4 from Tampa, I guess you'll take it, but man, you're not scoring still. This was a low-scoring series, and it was there for the taking at different points. Vladdy's suddenly gone a little cold. I see people talking about maybe it's not having Bo behind him in the lineup, so pitchers don't have to attack him quite as hard, and they'll worry about whoever's standing behind him. Maybe there's something to that, but the types of pitches he's seeing doesn't seem to indicate that that's the case. He's kind of gone cold here at the worst moment. I don't expect it to last, but it is a major part of why they're not scoring right now. As you sit here and look at this miracle season, and I got a little pushback. I called it a miracle season when Dan Schulman was on the show on the Wednesday edition of TCA, which is up now at tallcanaudio.com or on your favorite podcast app. I got a couple replies, a couple messages saying, I'm disrespecting these guys by calling it a miracle season, that they have no business being here. And I sort of hear your point, but no one expected them to be here. Dan said the same thing on the show. He sort of said a roughly 500 team would have been his prediction going into the season, with a chance that if things went well, you'd battle for a wild card spot, which is what you guys have been hearing me drone on about for 6 months now since the season started. So I don't think it's, like, maybe a miracle is a little over the top, but it's certainly an unexpected appearance here. But as you've rolled through it and you've gotten to this point against the rest of the American League East, excluding Tampa, so in games against Boston, New York, and Baltimore, the Blue Jays are 22-14. It's pretty good. Not a bad run against your divisional rivals. They're 3-7 against Tampa, and they're not good. You probably remember at the beginning of the season, they got off to a pretty good start, but everyone was waiting. What's it going to look like midsummer? MLB rejigged the entire schedule to try to avoid having those guys playing a ton of home games through the summer because of the way the temperatures get in Tampa and then the rain every damn day, and you don't have a roof, so how many games were going to be rained out? So they were on the road a ton. And everyone expected once that part of the schedule caught up to them, they'd sort of tire themselves out. And that's basically what happened. Tampa is not good, but you're 3-7 against these guys, which means even if you've got one more series against them next weekend, the last weekend of the year, September 26th to 28th, 3 more games against Tampa. If you sweep them, which there's no indication you're about to do, you're still going to finish the year against them under 500. And it's just wild to think about when you're 22-14 against Baltimore, Boston, and New York, and those guys have been right there playing well for large stretches this season, and you've cleaned them out. There's just always somebody stuck up your ass, and it's always Tampa. It really bugs me. They did announce on Thursday afternoon the rotation moves that are going to take place, or the guys who are going to start in the series this weekend in Kansas City. You'll get Scherzer on Friday night, Bieber on Saturday, and yeah, Trey Yesavage once more on Sunday. And I wonder what that means. It's still just one start. For all we know, he gets blown up on Sunday. But if he has another really solid outing, like, I don't blame them for starting him again, keeping him in his routine, and then making a decision after Sunday. Like, yeah, okay, that was pretty good. We've seen enough. You're going to be part of our playoff roster, but you will be out of the bullpen. But if he has another really good start, maybe you give him one more on that last weekend against Tampa. You got 3 games here against Kansas City. You got a day off. You got 3 against Boston. And then 3 to finish it out against Tampa. I do wonder if they have squeezed him in here, and it's not a squeeze really, but if they've chosen to give him Sunday and sort of throw the rotation off a little bit to avoid showing him to Boston next week. Like, in theory, he could have waited and pitched on Tuesday. A little more rest, keeps everybody on turn, lets Barrios have his spot, everything that goes into that. But if you're thinking there's a chance you're about to play Boston in a playoff series, and this guy might be a big part of your pitching plans, don't give them a look at him. Like, their scouts will have had a look at him. All these teams right now that are in the playoff race have scouts in each other's parks every day, taking as many notes as they can. But don't let their hitters see him. So I wonder if that goes into it. I wonder if it even matters. Like, he's going to start on Sunday, but they've already decided he won't start in the playoffs, and it will allow them, on that final weekend against Tampa to give them a time or two to come out of the bullpen, get used to doing that at the major league level. But as Dan suggested on the show on Wednesday, I don't think it's out of the question if he has another really solid start on Sunday, that maybe they give him one more on the following weekend, maybe on the Saturday, just a couple innings to keep him on turn. And then he'll be in the mix as a starter in the playoffs. I don't think that's the most likely outcome, but I think it's on the table all of a sudden, especially if Sunday goes well. So, look, it's really interesting. I really thought if we were going to see this guy at all this year, it would be strictly out of the bullpen, kind of the Aaron Sanchez treatment from back in 15, 16. Keep that pitch count, that inning count under control. I'm not so sure all of a sudden. The way they have lined this up to have him go on Sunday says to me there's a reason we're not showing him to Boston, and it would provide him one more opportunity to start the following weekend if you wanted him to before the playoffs. So we'll see. But that number, that record, 3-7 against Tampa, just 1 or 2 more wins against those guys, and you've already locked up your playoff spot. And I'm not worried at this point. You think it's coming anyway. You're almost sure it's coming anyway, but it could be done and dusted. On that note, Friday night against Kansas City was supposed to be an Apple TV exclusive. I know how much people love those. And Rogers was pretty worried that this would end up being the night that the Blue Jays clinch a playoff spot. And there's always the party afterwards and the champagne and the beers, spraying around afterwards and the jumping up and down on the field and everything that goes into it. And it would all happen on Apple TV instead of on Sportsnet. And I don't know. It's a reasonable concern, I guess. That's a big moment in a team's season. And so Rogers went through Major League Baseball and negotiated with with Apple TV to say, is there anything we can do here? We'd like our fans who don't have Apple TV to be able to watch that moment should it happen. Now, Apple could have said, no. This is one of those classic moments where we're trying to get people to sign up for our service. And this is one of those things that would make people do it. I don't want to miss when they clinch. So they have to watch it on our platform. And the thing that would have made that even easier for Apple right now is that they've decided the relationship after this season with Major League Baseball will not move forward. So you're not worried about goodwill. You're not worried about being a good partner. You just say, yeah, no, we're going to take this one last opportunity to get some people to sign up for Apple TV, and whatever happens to you guys down the road is really not our business. That is not what's going to happen. They've struck a deal. You won't be seeing Dan and Buck and Hazel May and the usual Sportsnet crew, but they are going to simulcast the Apple TV broadcast on Sportsnet. So for the rest of North America, it will still be only available on Apple TV. But here in Canada, you can watch the game on Sportsnet, but it will be the Apple version of the broadcast. So a compromise. I'm still certain, well, it's not going to matter now, but when this was announced on Thursday afternoon, we didn't know yet. People were disappointed that it wasn't going to be the Sportsnet crew that talked you through that moment, but it was better than nothing. Now, the Jays' loss on Thursday means they can't clinch on Friday, and this was all for nothing, which is kind of funny. But it did show that Sportsnet was willing to go to bat a little bit. The trade appears to have been that Friday's game against Kansas City will be a simulcast, like I said, the Apple broadcast on Sportsnet. But next Friday against Tampa Bay is Apple TV only. They sort of traded a game. We will give you next Friday, and it will be exclusive. That will not be a simulcast. That will be all Apple TV. And if you think about it, that might be worse. We'll see how this all plays out timing-wise. The Blue Jays will almost certainly, barring a disaster, have already clinched a playoff spot by then. But it is quite possible that next Friday night is the night they clinch the division. Assuming they're going to do so. Not trying to curse anything here. But that would be the bigger party. I was sort of talking to a couple people on Twitter on Thursday who follow the team and just sort of said, is there two parties? One when you clinch a playoff spot, when you clinch a division. Most people sort of agreed. Clinch the playoff spot. It's a tacit party. It's kind of a lame party. It's a Sunday party after you've already been partying for 2 nights and you're sort of out of gas. The big party is when you clinch the division. And I do think this was a dangerous trade for Sportsnet. Because while there are only 3 games left in that magic number to clinch a playoff spot, there are 6 to clinch a division spot, or a division win, which means this is going to take a little bit longer. And it's still very possible that lands on next Friday night, which you have given away now. I might have risked this, but it was a show of good faith, I will say, by Rogers to their fans to say we tried. We wanted to make sure you could see it without having to sign up for Apple TV Plus. And like I said, I suppose a show of good faith by Apple, if they ever want to do business with these guys again, to say, yeah, all right, we'll do a little business. Because like I said, the contract's up and they're not continuing it. They could have said, yeah, that's really your problem. If people in Toronto want to watch this game, they can pay for a month of Apple TV and watch it on our platform. So everybody got along and did the right thing, and then the Jays lost, and now that Friday game really isn't going to matter in terms of clinching the playoffs. Speaking of the ins and outs on the broadcasting stuff here, as hockey seasons ramp up, I was sort of taking a look at a few different things as it pertains to national broadcasts and how many games are on which platform, because you guys know I'm sort of a nerd for that shit. And I sort of did a count here on the American, this was tweeted out several weeks ago now, but the number of games each team will have on American national TV. And it's a little more for a lot of teams than usual, with TNT being one of the NHL's partners in the U.S. and them having just lost the NBA rights. Everybody spoke very highly of TNT's coverage of the NBA and inside the NBA with Barkley and Shaq and all of that. It's gone. They were cut out of the new deal. It's NBC and Peacock and ESPN and whatever else. So there's more space that in past years TNT has filled with NBA games, and now there are more openings for NHL games, and it looks like they're going to go ahead and take advantage of it. So I'm sort of curious, like, okay, which teams are going to appear most or least on American television? Let's kick it around. I'll give you a second to guess here. Let's start at the top. Which team in the U.S. do you think has the most games on national television this year, whether it be on ESPN, ABC later in the season always has those weekend games, or on TNT, and obviously this doesn't count for the playoffs. And while you're sort of kicking that around in your head, there was a time where we sort of said that the NHL had a new original six, right? Back when Sid and the Penguins were running hot and the Capitals were still good. They had sort of forgotten the original six, and they had like the NBC six that appeared on national TV. And it was Detroit was good, Chicago was good, Boston was good, and then Pittsburgh. And then it would sort of change around, like Philadelphia would be in there when they were having a good year. Certainly Washington. They had their own group and Canadian teams just did not appear on NBC back when they had the rights. There was no reason to. They don't draw ratings out of Canada, so let's say you put on Chicago versus Edmonton instead of Chicago versus Boston. In that Chicago-Boston game, you have two American markets who tune in. They're full fan bases, and that's good for your advertisers and your sponsors and the number of people watching your game. If you do Chicago-Edmonton, the people of Edmonton are watching that game on Sportsnet or CBC or whatever. That does nothing for your American sponsors. So Canadian teams just didn't appear. But we're sort of in a new era, and ESPN and TNT both seem to be focused more on star power and, at least trying to mix it up a little bit more. So with all that in mind, as we circle back here, I hope you've been paying attention as I've vamped for you a little bit and you've written down your answer. The team that will appear the most times on American TV this year, with a total of 18 appearances, like I said, on TNT, ESPN, or ABC, is the Washington Capitals. So it is a throwback to the new original six, as it was dubbed at the time, but it sort of feels like a year too late. Like, the Capitals, they won their division last year. Actually, I believe they won the conference last year. So it's not like they're not a good team, but it's not one of your, hottest markets in the league. And I wonder if this was, predetermined. Did you think that Ovi wasn't going to hit the goal-scoring record until early this season? Drew up all your plans. He got it done late last season. You're like, oh, fuck. Because what's left? I don't expect Washington to be... Well, I don't expect them to fall off a cliff, but I don't expect them to be as good as last year. And I suppose, technically, every time Ovechkin scores a goal this year, it will be the new NHL record. He's going to keep piling onto it. But it's far less compelling than it was last year, wondering when he was going to hit that mark. So sometimes circumstances just are what they are. What days do you play on? Who's your opponent that day? We'll make that one a national game. But 18 times for Washington, more than anybody else. And I get it, some of your big teams, like your actual original six and your big hockey markets, like Boston's not very good right now. Chicago's not very good right now. Detroit's mediocre right now. I expect the Rangers to be mediocre. So these big powerhouse markets that you traditionally put on national TV in the U.S. aren't that compelling right now. They still have the biggest fan bases, but how much of that fan base is going to be locked in this year if the teams are bad? So it makes it a little more complicated. Who do you think's the lowest? Which team? And this isn't counting Canadian teams. I will say there are only 2 Canadian teams that appear in any of these broadcasts this year. We'll get to that in a second. So we're not counting any Canadian teams, because if that's the case, the lowest number is 0. Which American team appears on national TV the fewest times this year? If you guessed Nashville Predators with just two times the Preds will be on national television. I almost said Nashville television. They'll be on Nashville television plenty. On national television this year. Give yourself a gold star. Imagine saying that a year ago when they had just brought in Jonathan Marchessault and Brady Shea and Steven Stamkos. We're like, wow. That was after going 2 rounds in the playoffs the year before. Nashville is on the come. And it just crumbled and fell apart. And again, Nashville, not one of your top markets, but just 2. I think Columbus is at like 5. Carolina, I believe, is at 9. And Carolina is a good team. Again, not a traditional market necessarily. But man, just two times for the Preds. Circling back to the 2 Canadian teams. I'll give you a second again to guess which Canadian teams will appear on national TV. And this is really, in my opinion, not overly shocking. Edmonton. Part of that's twofold. Obviously, it's the star power, right? ESPN and TNT have done a nice job of being more cognizant of broadcasting stars and worrying less about markets. So that's one thing. But the other thing is West Coast time zones. And there are fewer teams in the Pacific. I know that Edmonton is in the Mountain time zone. But when you're trying to do a double header on a Wednesday or things like that, your compelling matchups get lessened by the number of teams available to play in that time zone. So like LA, I believe, is on 14 times on national TV. Are they loaded with star power? No, but it's a big franchise and it plays often at 10 p.m. So you can put them into that time slot. So that helps. Like Seattle is on national TV 9 times. Are you significantly more interested in watching Seattle than you are in Nashville or Columbus? No. But hey, it's on at 10 o'clock, and we need 10 o'clock teams to help fill out the schedule. So there it is. Edmonton, it is mostly about McDavid and Draisaitl, but it helps that, hey, a couple of those times where they play LA or something like that, and we can drop that in a late night time zone, helps them get on more often. And the other team is your Toronto Maple Leafs. And everybody loves the Leafs, right? Everyone wants to see the Leafs on national TV, even in other countries. Look, the Leafs have a following in a lot of places. You see it certainly here across Canada, but in Buffalo, in Detroit, even some of those are Canadian fans. But you go to Florida, and there are Leaf fans there who have migrated. To California, same thing. There's full houses of Leaf fans. But I wonder if, as much as anything else, it's an Olympic year, and Austin Matthews was the captain of Team USA last year at the Four Nations. I do suspect a little bit that this is part of, as the NHL makes its return to the Olympics, putting a spotlight on big Team USA players and guys that they are counting on to be stars at the Olympics. Certainly, if Austin Matthews is healthy, he'll be one of their top stars. I don't mean healthy as in, will he play? I assume he'll play. Is he back to the 55, 60 goal scoring Austin Matthews, or is he last year's 33 goal scoring Austin Matthews? I'm assuming he's going to jump back to being closer to what we are used to from him. And in that case, it makes sense to put him on American television leading up to the Olympics. But the Leafs are on U.S. television 15 times. That is more than 11 American teams. And to me, that seems a little much, a little silly. I like it as a guy who waves that blue and white flag, and to clarify, that's that blue and white Leaf flag, not the red, blue and white flag. But the Leafs are on American television, national television, more than 11 American teams are, which is just wild to me. Couple quick little tidbits out of the 2 Ontario team training camps here. And I hesitate to get into any of this shit because I sort of mocked it off the top here. And I thought it was interesting coming out of Sens camp that Jake Sanderson was pointed out, centered out, whatever you'd want to call it, by head coach Travis Green as being the guy with the best fitness scores. I think that's incredibly exciting for the Senators and their fans. Maybe a little troubling for people who don't love the Sens. Just because this is already a guy on the move, right? A guy on the come who's stepping up, being more and more on your radar. As a defenseman, we assume there's still a couple more years of improvement before he starts to level off. And if he is also a fitness monster, that would be troubling to anyone, hoping that the Sens are not going to continue their forward momentum. But look, I see snarky quote tweets on the first day of camp. Like, in the Sens case, and we'll get to the Leafs here in a second, but in the Sens case, Brady Tkachuk is in one group, Tim Stützle is in another group. And all of a sudden, when they tweet out the line combinations from the first group, and it's Stützle with, Ridley Gregg and somebody else, you're like, oh, I would never run with that. And you're like, they're probably not gonna. There are 50 guys in camp. There's like 30 forwards. And I don't really know from camp to camp and coach to coach what the thinking is, because you do see in some cities from day one, these are the lines we're looking at, and we'll put line 1 with one group and line 2 with the other group. But for the most part, you can see what we're sort of looking at here. Other teams want to just balance it out. They want to have as many of their top guys in Group A as they have in Group B, and it just sort of works out that way. So now you have a line with Group 2 of Brady Tkachuk with Shane Pinto and Claude Giroux. And he's like, oh my God, they're doing it. They're giving Pinto the look. They're not. It's day 1 of training camp. You want Brady, like top guys, you want to mostly skate with top guys, but that doesn't mean that's what we're looking at for day 1. There's no chance that that's a look that you're going to see if everybody's healthy on night 1. It's just how it's been split up. You can tell, like I said, some teams do it differently. There are the 2 different approaches. There is no way that they are taking Brady away from Stützle and giving Ridley Gregg to him in his place, and then having Shane Pinto, I guess, as your number 1 center with Brady. Just settle down. It wasn't any better coming out of Leaf camp. Obviously. It's just bigger and louder. All the talk seems to be about Stolarz and what that contract looks like. I see them comparing him to Kevin Lankinen, which, is fair enough. Career backups who had a bigger role last year than some expected. The Spencer Knight one isn't really... It's a tough needle to thread if you're the Leafs and you're Anthony Stolarz. Stolarz has still to this day never played 40 games in the NHL. I think last year, what was he? Got to 23, 8-1. Had an injury mid-season where he missed a bunch of games. I believe that was the knee. And then finished the season after basically having his head knocked off. He's concussed out of the second round, and you don't see him again. So you haven't alleviated any of the injury concerns you have with that guy. You haven't seen him get a year younger. He's 31. Still hasn't played 40 games. I don't know what you offer that guy. It can't have much term. 3 years, maybe. And I don't know where you get to on that number. Like, I think Lankinen is at $5 million. Spencer Knight is much younger. I think people still believe has a high upside, although certainly there's reason to question that. But he got 5.8. And if you want to keep this contract short with Stolarz, in theory, you have to make up for that with a higher cap hit. Is it $4 million? I don't think you can go to $5 million. Maybe you can. That's a tough needle to thread, but that was the big talk in the first day or two of Leaf training camp, was what does a Stolarz extension look like? Because when he did play last year, he was very good for the Leafs. Very good. I think finished with a .926 save percentage. His high danger numbers were through the roof. Like, better than you could have expected, but how comfortable are you locking into it long term? And the other one here that stands out at a Leaf camp was, again, an overreaction to a line combination. That was Matias Maccelli playing with Austin Matthews and Matthew Knies. And look, I think that's a possibility, but I think almost everybody expected that was going to be Max Domi's spot to start, and Domi showed up to camp with an injury. Some sort of lower body thing. No one thinks it's too serious. They're calling it day-to-day, and, we'll see. And that was fraught with its own problems. There had been moments in the past where Domi had played with Matthews and it looked really good. He's a pass-first guy, similar to Marner. That is the only thing that he and Marner have in common, being pass-first guys, and reasonably good at it. Marner was certainly better. Marner was also far more skilled, far more responsible with the puck, far better in his own end, a penalty kill guy, and that would allow you to put the Matthews and Marner line in your defensive zone for a lot of faceoffs. That is troubling if it's Domi instead of Marner. Matthews is still very good in his own end, but now you have a young Matthew Knies who isn't quite there yet, and a Max Domi who just doesn't give a shit in his own end. That's not a line you want to rely on defensively anymore. Maybe it doesn't have to be, because all of a sudden you have two lines that, like, I think you would trust the Nicholas Waugh, Dakota Joshua third line in its own end, as well as the Scott Laughton, Steven Lorentz fourth line, and who knows who's going to end up on each of those other wings with those two lines. But I think you could bury both of those lines in your defensive zone and not ask Matthews to take so many defensive zone draws, which would be good for your offense. But the Domi idea is a little troubling. I'd still start with it because Matias Maccelli is a quiet guy coming off a down year who has played in Arizona and Utah. And to immediately throw that guy under the spotlight and say, hey, you're Mitch Marner now. You go play on the top line with Austin Matthews, I think is a lot to ask, both on the ice and off. Because the microphones that will be shoved in that guy's face, and he doesn't appear to be a guy who loves that, it's going to be an awful lot to ask. And I think they would have preferred to allow him to start, maybe with a Waugh and Joshua on the third line, maybe with Tavares and Nylander on the second line. But just get here, get comfortable, understand your role a little bit. He's good defensively. He's not as good as Marner defensively, but he's good defensively. And he's a good setup guy. Not quite as good as Marner, obviously, but a good setup. So I get it. I understand why you would be interested in giving him a look as Marner super light along with Matthews and Knies. But I'd want to pump the brakes on that a little bit and give him some time to get acclimated before I threw him into that mix. And sure enough, on day one at training camp, he was skating with Matthews and Knies. Is that in response to Domi being unable to go, or is that the plan? They're throwing him into the fire right away to get a look. I don't think that one's as cut and dry. I don't think we know yet. We'll have a better handle, certainly, once Domi gets back. But I think they're doing the thing I don't want them to do. I think they're throwing him into the fire right away. And again, that's trying not to read too hard into day one lineups. But if you were going to put him with Waugh and Dakota Joshua, you could have done that today and had like Robertson or any number of the 40 forwards you've got skating around in the Domi spot with Matthews and Nyes, if that is indeed Domi's spot. Put Michelli with wherever you thought you wanted Michelli and ask someone else who's not going to make it anyway to go be the placeholder for Domi. The fact that Michelli is there says to me, and I don't know anything, God, you guys know that's true. I doubt they saw Domi got injured and went, well, then screw it, just put Michelli up there. It seems more like that was the plan coming in when there were so many other placeholders available that you could have used and didn't. That was my one takeaway from Leaf Camp. So, lots of other news kicking around. Anze Kopitar announced on Thursday this will be his last year in the NHL. That happened on the same day that Clayton Kershaw announced that he's retiring at the end of this season for the Dodgers. A couple big losses for the LA sports market. The Kaprizov thing roars on. It's funny to watch Frank Saravalli backpedal hard on Thursday saying, I have no reason to believe that Kirill Kaprizov wants to leave Minnesota or has considered leaving Minnesota. It's just a negotiation. When he was the one literally like 4 days ago floating possible landing destinations. Man, some of these guys just aren't very good. Or assume we have no memory. It's a whole other conversation. Like I said, I was going to apologize once more if this show wasn't what you thought you were showing up for on Friday. But if you're still here, that's on you. Told you off the top. This was going to be something a little different than what we promised, but I appreciate you for sticking around and hanging out with me here on your Friday. And we will make it up to you. Like I said, Julian McKenzie is here next week. Michaela Schreider is on the show next week. Brent Wallace the week after that. I've learned nothing. I can promise Julian because I've already recorded it, so I know that's happening. But I get a little flustered sometimes. I used to have a policy that until a show was recorded, I didn't promote it. People get sick, people cancel, other things come up. Don't promise a guest until you already know for sure that show is happening because you already have it recorded. I've gotten a little lax with that over the last little bit because as the show's grown and gotten bigger, we had canceled on us often. So I will say this. All those names I just mentioned are on the schedule. That's what I expect is coming up for you. So we'll be surprised together if they don't happen. Thank you so much for listening to this one. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. My name is Matt Robinson. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you on Monday.
That's it. I cannot work under these conditions. If anybody wants me, I'll be downstairs at McDougal's. Call the weekend guy. I don't care.